The day my father's lawyer called me, I was in the middle of a grocery run, standing in the cereal aisle holding a box of oatmeal I didn't even want. I almost didn't pick up. Unknown number, Wisconsin area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'm glad I didn't. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to where it actually started. 4 years before that phone call. When I drove my little Honda Civic packed to the roof down I-94 and pulled into my childhood home for what I told myself would be just a little while. My name is Hannah. I was 29 years old, had a decent apartment in Chicago, a job I liked at a mid-sized marketing firm, and a life I was genuinely building. Then my dad had his first stroke. It wasn't catastrophic. That's what the doctors said. Not catastrophic. As if that was supposed to be comforting while my father sat in a hospital bed in Kenosha, Wisconsin, struggling to find the word for water. My brother called me from the waiting room. He was calm. Almost too calm. He said Dad was stable, said the doctors had a plan, said we'd figure it out. He said it the way people say things they have no intention of following through on. My brother, I'll call him what he is, the person who made every decision in this story harder, lives 40 minutes from my father's house. Has for years. He has a wife, a good job, a finished basement, and a guest room that has literally never had a guest in it. He did not offer to help. I gave notice at my apartment. I told my manager I needed a family leave. I loaded my car, and on a gray Tuesday in November, I moved back into my childhood home to take care of my dad. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. What time is it where you are right now, and what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely love knowing who's out there listening to this with me. Okay, back to that gray November. My father's house is a 3-bedroom ranch on a quiet street in Kenosha. He bought it in 1987, the year before I was born. My mother passed when I was 11, and after that it was just the three of us, me, my dad, and my brother. In that house with its slightly uneven back porch and the oak tree in the front yard that had gotten so big over the years it had started lifting the sidewalk. My father loved that tree, refused to have it trimmed. When I moved back in, the house needed work. That's the polite way to say it. The gutters hadn't been cleaned in 2 years. The hot water heater was making a sound that I can only describe as impending doom. The bathroom off the hallway had a slow leak under the sink that had warped the cabinet floor. My dad, before the stroke, had been managing okay. He was 67, still sharp, still driving himself to his Wednesday card game. But things had slipped. The kind of slippage that happened slowly and then all at once. I paid to have the hot water heater replaced. $1,100. I hired someone to fix the bathroom cabinet and reseal the sink. $450. I cleaned the gutters myself, standing on a ladder in 38-degree weather, pulling out handfuls of wet leaves while my dad watched from the window and told me I was doing it wrong. That part I actually loved. His recovery was slow but real. Physical therapy twice a week at a clinic about 6 miles away. I drove him every time. Speech therapy on Fridays. I sat in the waiting room and worked remotely on my laptop, had client calls in the parking lot, ate a lot of drive-through lunches because there wasn't time for anything else. I negotiated a permanent remote arrangement with my job, took a small pay cut to make it work, but it kept us afloat. My brother visited 4 times in the first year. 4 times. He'd come for a weekend, take Dad to lunch, fix himself a snack in the kitchen, and leave. Each time he left, my father looked a little smaller. I never said anything about it. That's important to understand about who I was then. I was the kind of person who absorbed everything and said nothing. I told myself it was strength. I know now it was something closer to exhaustion. The second year, I started making real improvements to the house. Not just repairs, improvements. Dad and I talked about it over dinner one night, and he said, "Hannah, do whatever makes sense. This is your home too." So I did. I refinished the hardwood floors in the living room and hallway, did most of the work myself, rented the sander, spent 2 weekends on my hands and knees. I had the kitchen repainted and replaced the dated laminate countertops with butcher block. Small stuff, but it changed the whole feel of the room. My father sat at the kitchen table the morning I finished and ran his hand across the new surface and said very quietly, "Your mother would have liked this." I repaid his monthly utility bills. I bought his groceries. I managed his medications, 3 prescriptions, refilled on a rotating schedule, and one of them required prior authorization every 6 months, which is its own special kind of bureaucratic nightmare. I did all of it. I kept records, mostly out of habit from work. Receipts in a folder. A spreadsheet I updated out of habit more than intention. My brother called about once a month. He asked how Dad was doing. He never asked how I was doing. By the 3rd year, Dad had improved enough that he was mostly independent during the day. He drove himself short distances. He went back to his card game. He had good days and harder days, but the trajectory was upward, and watching it felt like the most meaningful thing I had ever been part of. I had given up a lot. I knew that. My Chicago life had moved on without me. Friends got married, got promoted, moved to new neighborhoods. I'd had a relationship that didn't survive the distance and the stress. I was 32 years old, and my most reliable social interaction was Tuesday evening trivia at the bar 2 blocks away, where I went with my dad's neighbor, a retired nurse named Beverly, who had known my father for 20 years and who told me, regularly, that I was doing something good. I held on to that. I want to tell you about the will because this is the part of the story that I didn't know was happening while it was happening. My father, sometime in the 3rd year, while things were good, while he was clear and capable and going to his card game, had his will updated. His original will was simple, split everything equally between me and my brother. The house, the savings account, the small investment portfolio he'd built over a careful lifetime, 50-50. He didn't tell me he'd updated it. I didn't find out until after. His second stroke came in April of the 4th year. It was worse than the first. This time, there was a hospitalization of 11 days, followed by a transition to a rehab facility for 6 weeks. I managed all of it, the insurance calls, the facility paperwork, the discharge planning, the coordination with his primary care doctor. My brother flew in for 3 days during the hospitalization. He brought flowers. He cried in the hallway. He left before the discharge. My father came home. He was weaker. He needed more help. I hired a part-time home health aide named Carolyn who came 4 mornings a week, and I covered the rest. Dad had good days. He sat in his chair by the window and watched his bird feeder. He squeezed my hand sometimes when I brought him his coffee. He passed away on a Wednesday morning in September. It was quiet. Carolyn was there, and I was there, and the oak tree outside the window was just starting to turn. I'm going to take a breath here because even now, telling this, it sits in my chest. 3 weeks after the funeral, my brother called. Not to check in. Not to ask how I was holding up. He called to tell me he had spoken with an attorney and that the estate needed to be settled and that he wanted to walk me through the terms of the will. I said okay. I thought okay. I had no reason not to. He drove over on a Saturday. He sat at the kitchen table, the one with the butcher block countertop I had installed, and he put a folder on the surface and slid it toward me. I looked at the document inside. My father had updated his will 14 months before he died. The house I had lived in for 4 years. The house I had repaired and improved and cleaned and cared for and sat in through 2 hospitalizations, was left entirely to my brother. I stared at the page for a long time. My brother said, "There's also a life insurance policy. You're the beneficiary on that. $40,000. And the savings account is split. $40,000. The house was worth somewhere between $300,000 and $340,000 in the current market. I knew this because I had been the one dealing with the property tax assessments. I looked up at him. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not quite guilt. Not quite satisfaction. Something careful and practiced. When did he change it? I said. 14 months ago. Was he? I stopped. Did you know? He didn't answer right away. That was its own kind of answer. I want to be careful here about what I say, because I don't know everything that happened between my father and my brother in those phone calls I wasn't on. I don't know what was said. I know my father loved us both. I believe that completely. But I also know that my brother had a way of framing things, of presenting situations in particular lights. And I know that 14 months ago, my father was recovering from his second stroke, and was not, whatever the legal standard might say, entirely himself. I stood up from the table. I said, "I need a few days." My brother said, "Of course." He took the folder with him when he left. I sat alone in that kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Beverly's porch light came on across the street. I could see the oak tree from where I was sitting, the one that was lifting the sidewalk, the one my father refused to have trimmed. I thought about 4 years. I thought about the spreadsheet. I called a friend from my Chicago days, someone who had gone to law school, who was now in family and estate law in Milwaukee. Her name is not important. But she answered on the second ring and she listened to everything I said, and then she said, "Hannah, do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. And get me those records you've been keeping." I pulled out the folder. Everything was there. Every receipt. Every utility payment. Every repair. The home health aid invoices. The mileage log got kept for the PT appointments because my father's accountant had suggested it for medical deduction purposes, and I had never stopped. 4 years of documented, time-stamped financial contribution to the maintenance and upkeep of the property. My friend reviewed it. She also, and this is the part that changed everything, pulled the deed in the property history. And she found something. 14 months ago, when my father updated his will, he was still in the probate process from a small parcel of land he'd inherited from his own father. His estate was not, at that moment, fully settled. There were questions about the timing of the will amendment and my father's cognitive state, questions that were documentable, given his medical records, given the recency of his second stroke. There was also the matter of something my father had done, quietly, without telling either of us. 2 years before he passed, he had added my name to the deed. I didn't know. He hadn't mentioned it. Maybe he thought I knew. Maybe he did it and forgot. Maybe, and I have thought about this more than I can tell you, maybe some part of him knew, even then, what might happen after he was gone, and he wanted to make sure. My name was on the deed. Co-owner. Equal title. My brother could not simply inherit the house as a sole asset because it was not a sole asset. I had a legal ownership interest that predated the will amendment by over a year. My friend filed the necessary paperwork. My brother retained his own attorney. It was not pleasant. There were phone calls I won't repeat, and a period of about 6 weeks where the only communication between us went through our respective lawyers. But here's what happened. We reached a settlement. The house was assessed. I bought out my brother's share at a fair market price that reflected both his inheritance interest and my 4 years of documented contribution. My brother walked away with a significant sum. So did I, in a different way. I walked away with the house. My name on the door. The oak tree in the yard. The butcher block countertop in the kitchen. It was not what I expected my life at 33 to look like. I'd imagined something different. A city somewhere. A career ascending in a straight line. A life I'd built from scratch on my own terms. Instead, I have a house in Kenosha, Wisconsin. With uneven floorboards, I refinished with my own hands, and a bird feeder I keep filled, because I can't seem to stop. My brother and I don't speak much. Maybe that changes someday. I haven't closed the door in my mind, but I've stopped standing in front of it waiting. What I want to say, if there's anything useful in this story for anyone, is that I almost didn't keep those records. The spreadsheet was an afterthought. The receipts were in a folder because I'm a slightly anxious person who keeps too much paper. I never thought I'd need them. I kept them out of habit, not strategy. Keep them anyway. Keep everything. Not because you expect people to betray you. Keep them because life is complicated and families are complicated, and the person who loves you most in the world can still, in a moment of weakness or pressure or confusion, make a decision that leaves you standing in a kitchen wondering what happened. My father added my name to that deed for a reason. I think he knew. I think in his quieter moments, even when things seemed fine, he was trying to protect me the only way he knew how, without making it a conversation, without making my brother feel excluded, without creating conflict in the time he had left. That's what I hold on to. Beverly came over the week after everything was settled. She brought a casserole and a bottle of wine, and we sat on the back porch in the October cold, and she told me my dad used to talk about me to her. Said I had his stubbornness. Said it like it was the best thing about me. I think about that a lot. The oak tree outside is still lifting the sidewalk. The city sent a notice about it last spring. I called them and told them we'd look into it. I have not looked into it. It's not going anywhere. Neither am I. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what actually saved me in this situation, and the honest answer is boring. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't a perfect speech I delivered across a kitchen table. It was a folder. A plain manila folder stuffed with receipts, printouts, and a spreadsheet I almost deleted 3 times because it felt excessive. That's the part that stays with me. I didn't keep those records because I was strategic. I kept them because I'm someone who has a hard time throwing things away, and because an accountant once mentioned mileage deductions and I never stopped logging. I wasn't building a case. I was just living my life carefully. The way my father had always lived his. Tracking what came in and what went out. Not because anyone told me to, but because it felt like the responsible thing to do. And then, one Saturday morning, sitting at the butcher block counter I had installed with my own hands, looking at a legal document that said the home I had lived in and cared for and poured 4 years of myself into belonged to someone else. That boring, careful habit turned out to be the most important thing I had. I think about cause and effect a lot now. Not in any cosmic sense, just in the plain practical sense of the things we do quietly, consistently, without applause, tend to be the things that matter most when everything else falls apart. My father added my name to that deed without telling me. He did it because he was a man who thought ahead, who paid attention even when he seemed distracted, who knew, on some level, that love alone doesn't protect people. Documentation does. Preparation does. Showing up, day after day, even when no one is watching and no one is keeping score, does. What my brother did was a failure of character, and I say that without anger anymore. He made choices based on what was easy and what was convenient and what he thought he could get away with, and those choices had consequences, not because the universe punished him, but because I had evidence, and evidence doesn't care about intentions or family dynamics or who cried harder at the funeral. What I did, and I mean this without self-congratulation, was show up. For 4 years, I showed up. I drove my father to physical therapy in the cold. I sat in waiting rooms. I paid utility bills and kept invoices and didn't leave when things got hard. Not because I expected a reward. Because he was my dad, and it was the right thing, and someone had to do it. That's the only lesson I know how to extract from any of this. Do the right thing, quietly, for a long time. Keep your records. Trust the people who earn it, not just the ones who share your last name. And when someone tries to take what you've built, don't panic. Get still. Make one phone call. Beverly told me my dad said I had his stubbornness. I used to think stubbornness was a flaw. I don't anymore. Stubbornness, when it's pointed in the right direction, is just another word for not giving up on what's true. The oak tree is still lifting the sidewalk out front. I'm still not dealing with it. Some things are worth holding on to exactly as they are.